Beloved, before you say another word today, before you open your mouth to complain, to worry, to doubt, I want you to stop. Stop right where you are. Because I believe with all of my heart that somewhere in your house right now, in this very hour, there is a heavenly visitor. Yes, an angel of the living God has been assigned to your address. Not your neighbor's house, not your brother's house, your house. You may not have seen him with your natural eyes, but heaven does not always announce itself with trumpets. Sometimes heaven announces itself in whispers, in small, quiet signs that only the discerning heart can recognize. The Bible tells us in Hebrews chapter 14, "Are they not all ministering spirits sent forth to minister for them who shall be heirs of salvation?" Did you hear that? Ministering spirits sent for you. So today, I am not going to give you theory. I am not going to give you empty religion. I am going to give you 3 signs, 3 unmistakable, undeniable signs that will tell you beyond any shadow of doubt that an angel has taken up residence in your home. And when you recognize these signs, beloved, your fear will turn into faith. Your confusion will turn into confidence because you will finally understand you are not alone. You have never been alone. Are you ready? Say with me, Lord, open my eyes to see what heaven has already sent. Let's begin, beloved. Let us begin with the first sign, a sudden unexplainable peace that fills the room. Not a peace that you manufactured, not a peace that came because your circumstances changed. I am talking about a peace that has no natural explanation, a peace that descends into the room like a blanket, falls over a sleeping child, quiet, gentle, and complete. You know the difference, don't you? You know what your own peace feels like when you have paid your bills, when your children are sleeping soundly, when your health report comes back clean. That peace makes sense. That peace has a reason. But I am talking about something else entirely. I am talking about the peace that comes in the middle of the storm when nothing on the outside has changed. When the bank account is still empty, when the doctor's report is still frightening, when the marriage is still strained, and yet suddenly, without warning, peace floods the room like a river that has broken through a dam. The prophet Isaiah wrote of the peace that passes understanding. And I want you to notice those words carefully. Passes understanding. That means your natural mind cannot explain it. Your logic cannot account for it. Your circumstances certainly do not justify it. And when something happens in your life that your mind cannot explain, but your spirit immediately recognizes, beloved, that is not coincidence. That is confirmation. That is heaven's fingerprint left behind in your atmosphere. I remember years ago in the early days of my ministry when I had nothing, no building, no members, no resources. I would kneel on that dirt floor in Korea and pray until my knees bled. And there were nights when the weight of failure pressed down on me so heavily that I thought I could not rise the next morning. But then in an instant, in the middle of my weeping, a peace would come over that tent that I could not have produced myself. My circumstances had not changed. My bank account had not changed, but the atmosphere had changed. And I learned, beloved, that when the atmosphere changes before the circumstances change, it is because someone unseen has entered the room. This is what I want you to understand today. Angels do not always announce their arrival with a flash of light or a voice from the clouds. Most often, beloved, they announce their arrival through atmosphere, through feeling, through a shift so subtle that if you are not spiritually alert, you will miss it entirely. You will simply say, "I don't know why, but I suddenly feel calm," and you will move on with your day, never realizing that heaven just visited your living room. Think about Daniel thrown into the den of lions. The natural expectation was terror. The natural expectation was screaming, panic, the sound of teeth and claws. But what happened instead? Daniel slept. Daniel rested among the lions as if he were resting in his own bed. Why? Because the scripture tells us plainly, my God had sent his angel and had shut the lions' mouths. The angel did not only shut the mouths of the lions. The angel shut the door on Daniel's fear. The angel brought an atmosphere of peace into a den that should have been filled with terror. So I ask you, beloved, has there been a night recently when you should have been consumed with worry, and yet you slept like a baby? Has there been a meeting you were dreading, a confrontation you feared, a diagnosis you were terrified to hear, and yet right before it happened, an unusual calm settled over you. Do not dismiss that as random. Do not call that coincidence. That is your first sign. That is heaven's ministering spirit standing guard in your room, shutting the mouths of the lions that were sent to devour your peace. And here is something else I want you to notice. This peace often comes right before a battle, not after it. It is not always a reward for victory already won. Sometimes it is a preparation for a victory that has not yet arrived. The peace comes first, beloved, because heaven already knows the outcome, even while you are still standing in the middle of the uncertainty. The angel assigned to your house is not waiting for the problem to be solved before bringing you comfort. The angel brings the comfort first as a sign, as a promise, as a whisper that says it is already handled. I have seen this in the lives of my own congregation time and time again. Businessmen who came to me the night before bankruptcy proceedings, expecting to lose everything, and yet they told me they slept the deepest sleep of their lives. Mothers who sat beside hospital beds watching machines beep through the night, who described the peace so overwhelming it felt physical, as if hands were resting on their shoulders. These are not psychological tricks, beloved. These are not coping mechanisms your mind invented to survive. This is the ministering work of angels sent by a father who has never once forgotten the address of his children. So today, examine your own life. Search your memory. When was the last time peace came to you without a natural reason? When was the last time your heart was calm while your circumstances were still chaos? Hold on to that memory, beloved, because it was not an accident. It was the first sign. It was your house being visited, beloved. Let us move now to the second sign. You wake up at the exact same hour night after night. This is not insomnia. This is not stress. This is not simply getting older, as some would try to explain it away. I am talking about something far deeper, something that has puzzled and awakened millions of believers across the world. A divine appointment written into the clock itself. Have you noticed it? Perhaps it is 300 in the morning. Perhaps it is 2:30 or 4:15. But whatever the hour, it repeats night after night. Your eyes open at the exact same minute, as though someone reached into your sleep and gently touched your shoulder. You did not set an alarm. You did not drink coffee too late in the day. And yet, like clockwork, heaven's clockwork, you find yourself suddenly fully awake, staring into the darkness, heart alert, mind clear. I want you to understand something about the hours between midnight and dawn. The Bible calls this the night watch. In the Psalms, David wrote, "In the night, his song shall be with me, and my prayer unto the God of my life." And in the Gospel of Mark, we read that Jesus himself, rising up a great while before day, went out and departed into a solitary place, and there prayed. Beloved, there is something about the deep of night that heaven treasures. It is quiet. It is undistracted. The television is off. The phone is silent. The children are sleeping. And in that stillness, the veil between the natural and the supernatural grows thin. When an angel is assigned to your house, one of his ministries is to awaken you at the appointed hour, not to torment you, not to rob you of rest, but to invite you into a meeting that only happens when the rest of the world is asleep. I have experienced this myself, beloved. There were seasons in my ministry when I would wake at precisely the same hour every single night for weeks at a time. At first, I thought it was simply the pressure of pastoring a growing church, but then I began to notice every time I woke, a name would come to my mind, a face, a situation, someone in my congregation who was in danger, who was in crisis, who needed intercession that very hour. And when I obeyed, when I rose from my bed and prayed for that person by name, I would later discover that at that very hour they were going through the exact trial the Lord had shown me. This is not superstition, beloved. This is the ministry of angels coordinating heaven's timing with earth's need. Revelation chapter 8 tells us that angels are involved in the very timing of events on earth, holding back and releasing according to divine schedule. If angels are concerned with the timing of nations, how much more are they concerned with the timing of your own life, your own family, your own crisis? Consider also the story of Peter in the book of Acts chapter 12. Peter was in prison, chained between two soldiers, sentenced to die the next morning. And in the middle of the night, notice the timing. Beloved, in the middle of the night, an angel of the Lord appeared, and the light shined in the prison. The angel struck Peter on the side and raised him up, saying, "Arise up quickly." The chains fell from his hands. The angel led him past the gods, past the iron gate, which opened of its own accord. All of this happened in the deep hours of the night, when Peter should have been sleeping, when the world should have been silent. But heaven does its greatest work while the earth sleeps. So when you wake at that same hour, night after night, do not turn over in frustration. Do not reach for your phone to scroll through distractions. Do not curse the sleeplessness as an enemy. Instead, beloved, sit up, open your eyes, ask the Lord, "Why have you awakened me? What do you want to show me? Who do you want me to pray for?" I promise you, if you will begin to treat that hour as sacred rather than as an inconvenience, you will discover that heaven has been trying to meet with you all along. I have heard testimony after testimony of believers who woke at 300ers in the morning and felt led to check on a family member only to discover that at that very moment tragedy was unfolding. A car accident, a medical emergency, a moment of temptation. Their prayer offered in obedience to that strange awakening became the very thing that turned the tide. This is the angel assigned to your house, beloved, nudging you awake, calling you into partnership with heaven's work. Examine your own nights. Has there been a recurring hour when your eyes open without explanation? Has your body developed a rhythm that your mind cannot account for? Do not dismiss it as coincidence or aging or stress. That hour has been marked. That hour has been chosen. And an angel is standing at your bedside waiting for you to rise and meet him there. Beloved, now let us turn to the third sign. Doors that were closed begin to open without explanation. This is one of the clearest, most visible signs of angelic activity. Because unlike the peace that fills a room or the hour that wakes you from sleep, this sign is not something you feel in your spirit alone. This sign you can see with your own eyes in the natural world unfolding before you in ways that leave you shaking your head in wonder. Think about it, beloved. How many doors have been shut in your life? How many times have you knocked and knocked and knocked until your knuckles were raw? Until your voice was from asking? Until your heart grew tired of hoping? The job that rejected you 3 times, the loan that was denied, the relationship that seemed permanently severed, the opportunity that always somehow slipped through your fingers at the very last moment. You have stood before closed doors, beloved, and you know the particular ache of a door that will not budge no matter how hard you push. But then, and this is the sign I want you to recognize, suddenly, without your pushing, without your striving, without your manipulating or maneuvering, that very door begins to creak open. The person who once ignored your calls now calls you first. The company that rejected your application calls you back for a position you never even applied for. The relationship that seemed permanently broken finds its way back together through circumstances neither of you engineered. And when this happens, beloved, I want you to stop and ask yourself who moved this door, because I promise you, it was not your own hand. The book of Acts 12 gives us one of the clearest pictures of this truth. Peter, having just been miraculously released from his chains by the angel of the Lord, came to the gate of the city, the iron gate that led out into the street. And the scripture says that gate opened to them of his own accord. Notice that phrase, beloved, of his own accord. No human hand touched that gate. No key was turned by mortal fingers. The gate simply opened, moved by an unseen hand, because heaven had already decreed that Peter would walk free that night. This is exactly what I mean when I say angels open doors. They do not always announce themselves. They do not always perform miracles that leave crowds gasping in the streets. Sometimes their work is quiet, administrative, almost invisible, a phone call rerouted, a decision reversed in a boardroom you were never present in, a heart softened in someone who had every reason to remain hardened against you. And when you walk through that door, beloved, when you step into that opportunity, you must understand you did not open it. You simply walked through what heaven had already unlocked. I remember in the difficult early years of building my church, There were times when we needed land, we needed permits, we needed resources that seemed entirely out of reach. I would go before government officials who had no reason to favor a poor pastor with a tent congregation. And yet time and time again, doors that should have remained shut for years, decades even, would open within days. Officials who had denied similar requests to others would suddenly approve ours without explanation. I did not have the connections. I did not have the wealth. I did not have the influence. But I had an angel assigned to my house, beloved. And that angel was going ahead of me, softening hearts, moving obstacles, opening gates before I ever arrived to knock on them. Psalm the 24th of December last. Lift up your heads, O ye gates, and be yea, lift up ye everlasting doors, and the King of glory shall come in. This is not merely poetic language. Beloved, this is a spiritual principle. When the King of glory is present in your house, the doors around you begin to respond to his authority. Gates that have stood shut for generations begin to lift. Doors that have been bolted by circumstance begin to swing wide. So I ask you, beloved, has there been a door in your life recently that opened without your effort? A door you had given up on, a door you had stopped knocking at, a door you had resigned yourself to walking away from, and yet without warning it opened before you. Do not call this luck. Do not call this timing. Do not call this coincidence. That is the third sign. That is your angel walking ahead of you into rooms you have not yet entered, speaking to people you have not yet met, moving mountains you did not even know were blocking your path. And I want you to notice something important. Beloved, these doors often open at the very moment you are tempted to give up. It is not always at the beginning of your struggle. It is often at the end of your strength, right when you are ready to walk away, that the door suddenly swings open. This is because heaven's timing is not your timing, and the angel assigned to your house has been working behind the scenes long before you ever saw the results with your natural eyes. Beloved, let us now turn to the fourth sign, a strange sweet fragrance with no natural source. This sign is perhaps the most mysterious of all because it cannot be explained by science. It cannot be traced to any candle, any perfume, any flower in the room. It simply appears filling the air with a sweetness that has no earthly origin. And then just as quickly as it came, it disappears, leaving you standing there wondering what you just experienced. Have you ever been sitting quietly, perhaps in prayer, perhaps simply going about your day, and suddenly a fragrance drifts past you, something like roses, something like fresh oil, something like a garden in full bloom, and yet there are no roses in your house, no oil burning, no garden within 100 miles. You turn to your left, you turn to your right, you search for the source, and there is none. And then as quickly as it appeared, it vanishes, leaving you standing in silence, your heart suddenly aware that something sacred has just passed through the room. Beloved, I want to tell you this is not your imagination. This is not a trick of the mind. Throughout the scripture, fragrance is consistently connected to the presence of the holy, to worship, to the very throne room of God. In the book of Exodus, God gave Moses a precise formula for the incense that was to be burned before him, and he called it holy, a fragrance set apart, a fragrance that belonged to him alone. In the Song of Solomon, the beloved is described again and again through the language of fragrance, mere frankincense, spices that fill a room and announce a presence before the person is even seen. And in the book of Revelation chapter 5, we read of golden bowls full of incense described as the prayers of the saints rising up before the throne. Fragrance, beloved, is heaven's language. It is the aroma that accompanies the sacred. So when a fragrance appears in your home with no natural source, I want you to consider what this means. It means that something sacred has entered your space. It means the atmosphere around you has shifted from the ordinary to the holy, if only for a moment. And most often, beloved, this is the signature left behind by an angelic visitation, a lingering trace like footprints in fresh snow, proof that someone from another realm has just passed through your house. I remember a woman in my congregation years ago whose husband had fallen gravely ill, given only days to live by the doctors. She sat beside his bed through the night, praying, weeping, holding on to every promise of Scripture she could remember. And in the early hours of the morning, she told me a fragrance filled the room so suddenly and so powerfully that she nearly fell out of her chair. It smelled, she said, like nothing she had ever experienced, sweet, warm, alive. There were no flowers in that hospital room, no perfume, no candles. And within hours, beloved, her husband's condition began to turn. The doctors could not explain it, but she knew. She knew that fragrance had announced a visitor, and that visitor had come to bring healing. This is not an isolated testimony. Beloved, I have heard it from believers all across the world. In Korea, in America, in Africa, in the islands of the Pacific, the same testimony over and over again. A fragrance appears unexplainable, undeniable, and shortly afterward breakthrough follows. A healing, a financial provision, a restored relationship, a word of direction that changes the course of an entire family. The fragrance is not the miracle itself. Beloved, it is the announcement that a miracle is on its way. I want you to also understand, beloved, that this sign often comes during your lowest moments, not your highest. It is not something that typically happens during a joyful celebration when everything is already going well. It comes in the hospital room. It comes in the middle of a sleepless, anxious night. It comes when you are on your knees, out of options, out of strength, out of answers. This is because the fragrance is not a reward for having it all together. It is a comfort sent to those who have nothing left but faith. It is heaven's way of saying, I am here. I have not left you. I have not forgotten your address. So examine your memory, beloved. Has there been a moment, perhaps you dismissed it at the time, perhaps you thought you were imagining things, when a sweet, unexplainable fragrance passed through your room? Did you search for its source and find nothing? Did it vanish just as suddenly as it appeared? Do not brush that memory aside as insignificant. That was the fourth sign. That was the fragrance of heaven left behind by a messenger who had been sent in that very hour to stand watch over your house. Beloved, let us now turn to the fifth sign. Your enemies suddenly change their behavior toward you. This is a sign that many believers overlook entirely because we are so accustomed to watching for miracles in the sky, for visions in the night, that we forget heaven's greatest interventions often happen quietly in the hearts of the very people who once stood against us. Think about it, beloved. How many of you have had someone in your life who opposed you, someone who spoke against you in meetings you were not present in? Someone who worked deliberately or through jealousy to see you fail. Someone whose very presence in a room made your stomach tighten because you knew what they thought of you. You knew what they had said about you. You knew the plans they had whispered against your name. These are the enemies I speak of, beloved. Not always dramatic, not always violent, but real nonetheless, standing as obstacles between you and the blessing God has prepared for you. But then, and this is the sign something shifts, the person who once spoke against you suddenly speaks in your favor. The coworker who undermined your every move suddenly recommends you for the promotion. The family member who criticized your every decision suddenly calls to apologize, to reconcile, to bless what they once cursed. The competitor who tried to destroy your business suddenly refers clients to you. And when this happens, beloved, I want you to stop and ask yourself, what changed their heart? Because I promise you, it was not a conversation you had. It was not a persuasive argument you presented. Something happened in the unseen realm, has snorts, and it changed the seen realm before your very eyes. The book of Proverbs tells us, when a man's ways please the Lord, he maketh even his enemies to be at peace with him. Notice, beloved, this is not something you accomplish through your own diplomacy. This is something the Lord does. And how does the Lord do this? Often, beloved, through the ministering work of angels who move behind the scenes, softening hardened hearts, restraining evil intentions, turning the counsel of the wicked into confusion, and redirecting the very plans that were formed against you. Consider the story of Balaam in the book of Numbers. Balak, the king of Moab, hired Balaam specifically to curse the children of Israel, to speak destruction over God's people. Balaam set out with the full intention of cursing them, but something stood in his way. An angel of the Lord, sword drawn, blocked the path seen even by Balaam's donkey before Balaam himself could perceive it. And what happened? Beloved, every single time Balaam opened his mouth to curse Israel, blessing came out instead. His enemy's own hired prophet became the mouth through which heaven declared favor over God's people. This is what an angel can do. Beloved, not only protect you from the enemy's actions, but turn the enemy's very words, the enemy's very intentions into instruments of blessing. I have watched this happen countless times in my own ministry. There were men, powerful men, who once stood publicly against the church I was building, who mocked what we were doing, who tried to block our permits, who spread rumors intended to shut our doors before we ever opened them. And yet, beloved, one by one, over months and years, I watched their hostility soften. Some became quiet, some became indifferent, and remarkably, some became our strongest supporters, defending us in rooms where we could not defend ourselves. I did not orchestrate this. I did not have the political power to force such a change, but I had an angel assigned to my house, going ahead of me into boardrooms and government offices I never entered, standing between me and every tongue that rose against me. This is exactly what Isaiah 54:17 promises us. No weapon that is formed against thee shall prosper, and every tongue that shall rise against thee in judgment thou shalt condemn. Notice, beloved, this verse does not promise that no weapon will be formed. Weapons will be formed, tongues will rise. Opposition is guaranteed in this life. But the promise is that these weapons will not prosper, that these tongues will not succeed. And this protection, beloved, is administered by the ministering spirits sent to stand guard over the children of God. So I ask you today, has there been someone in your life who once stood against you, who once spoke evil concerning you, who once seemed determined to see you fail, and yet without explanation, their heart has softened toward you? Has an old rival become an unexpected ally? Has a critic become a quiet supporter? Do not dismiss this as simple human change of heart. Do not call it coincidence or good timing. That is the fifth sign, beloved. That is the angel assigned to your house, moving in rooms you will never see, speaking to hearts you could never reach, turning the very weapons formed against you into instruments that now work on your behalf. Beloved, let us now turn to the sixth sign. Protection appears in the place of what should have been disaster. This is perhaps the sign that leaves the greatest number of believers trembling with gratitude, because this is the sign that reveals just how close destruction came and how mysteriously, how completely it was turned aside at the very last possible moment. Have you had a moment like this, beloved? A moment where, by every natural calculation, you should have been destroyed, where the accident should have taken your life, where the diagnosis should have ended in tragedy, where the financial collapse should have swallowed everything you owned. And yet somehow impossibly you walked away, not injured, not consumed, not destroyed. You walked away shaken, perhaps trembling, but alive, whole, standing on your own 2 feet, staring at the wreckage that should have been your own grave. I want you to think carefully about this, beloved, because so many of us pass over these moments too quickly. We say, I was lucky. We say that was a close call. We move on with our lives grateful but unchanged, never stopping to ask the deeper question, who intervened? Because I promise you, beloved, luck does not explain the car that spun out on the highway and somehow missed every other vehicle. Luck does not explain the fire that consumed the building next door but stopped at your property line. Luck does not explain the diagnosis that should have been terminal but mysteriously reversed itself before treatment could even begin. These are not the products of chance. Beloved, these are the fingerprints of angelic protection. Psalm 91 gives us one of the clearest descriptions of this ministry in all of Scripture. He shall give his angels charge over thee to keep thee in all thy ways. They shall bear thee up in their hands, lest thou dash thy foot against the stone. Notice, beloved, the specificity of this language, not a general blessing, not a vague sense of protection, but angels with a charge, a specific assignment to keep you, to bear you up, to prevent even the smallest injury before it happens. This is not poetry, beloved. This is the operating manual of heaven's ministering spirits. I remember a family in my congregation, faithful people who had given generously, who had prayed fervently, who had walked in obedience to the Lord for many years. One evening, their car was struck by a truck that had run a red light at full speed broadside directly into the passenger door where their young daughter sat. By every calculation of physics, of impact, of force, that child should not have survived. The police officers who arrived at the scene said openly that they did not understand how anyone in that seat could have walked away without a single broken bone. But she did, beloved, she walked away. And when I sat with that family afterward, the mother told me weeping, "Pastor, I felt something in that car with us. I felt hands. I felt an embrace right before the impact. That, beloved, was not her imagination. That was the sixth sign. Protection appearing in the place of what should have been disaster." Consider also the story of the three Hebrew men in the book of Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, thrown into a furnace heated 7 times hotter than usual, a furnace so intense that it killed the soldiers who threw them in. By every natural law, those 3 men should have been ashes within seconds. But when King Nebuchadnezzar looked into the furnace, he did not see 3 men. He saw 4. Lo, I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they have no hurt. And the form of the 4th is like the Son of God, an angel, beloved, standing in the very center of what should have been certain death, and the fire had no power to harm them. This is the ministry of protection, beloved, and I want you to understand something important about it. Most of the time, you never even see the danger you were protected from. Most of the time, there is no dramatic furnace, no visible truck, no clear moment where you watch destruction approach and then turn aside. Most of the time, the angel assigned to your house intercepts the danger before it ever reaches your awareness. The drunk driver who was supposed to be on your route but took a different road. The illness that was supposed to take hold but never developed. The financial collapse that was supposed to happen but was mysteriously delayed until provision arrived. You will never see most of what you were protected from, beloved, and that is exactly why we must remain grateful for the disasters we do recognize, because they are proof of the countless disasters we never even knew we escaped. So examine your own life, beloved. Has there been a moment when you should have been destroyed, and yet you walked away untouched? A diagnosis that should have ended differently, an accident that should have taken more than it did, a collapse that should have consumed everything, and yet somehow mysteriously you were spared. Do not call this luck, beloved. Do not call this coincidence. That is the 6th sign. That is your angel standing between you and the fire, bearing you up in his hands so that not even your foot would strike against the stone. Beloved, let us now turn to the 7th sign. A holy whisper interrupts your thoughts at the right moment. This sign is quieter than all the others, more delicate, easier to dismiss, and yet it may be the most important sign of all, because it often arrives at the precise moment when a single decision will determine the entire course of your life. Have you experienced this, beloved? You are going about your ordinary business, driving down a familiar road, sitting in a meeting, walking through your own kitchen, and suddenly, without warning, a thought interrupts you. Not a thought that arose from your own reasoning, not a thought connected to whatever you were previously thinking about, a thought that seems to drop into your mind from somewhere outside of you, clear, urgent, unmistakable. Turn left instead of right. Call your mother right now. Do not sign that document. Leave this place immediately. And though you have no natural reason to obey, though every rational explanation tells you to ignore it, something in your spirit recognizes the voice and you obey. And later, beloved, you discover that obedience saved your life, or saved your marriage, or saved your finances, or saved someone you love. This is what I mean by a holy whisper, beloved. It is not the loud, dramatic voice that some people expect when they think of angelic communication. It is not thunder from the sky. It is a whisper, quiet, brief, easily missed if you are not paying attention, and yet powerful enough to redirect the entire trajectory of your day, your week, your life. The prophet Elijah experienced this exact pattern in the book of 1 Kings chapter 19. Elijah was hiding in a cave, exhausted, afraid, ready to give up entirely on his calling. And the Lord passed by. But notice, beloved, how he passed by. Not in the great and strong wind that tore the mountains apart, not in the earthquake, not in the fire, but after the fire, the scripture says, came a still small voice. And it was in that still small voice, that whisper, that Elijah received his instructions, his renewed purpose, his path forward. Beloved, if the God of the universe chose to speak to one of the most powerful prophets in history through a whisper rather than a shout, how much more should we expect his messengers to communicate with us the same way? I remember many years ago driving to an appointment that I had scheduled weeks in advance, an important meeting regarding the construction of our church building. As I approached the intersection where I normally turned, a thought interrupted me so clearly that I actually spoke aloud in my car. Do not go this way today. I had no reason to disobey this thought. It did not come from worry. It did not come from fear. It simply appeared calm and certain. I took the alternate route, adding nearly 20 minutes to my drive. When I arrived, shaken but unharmed, I later learned that a serious accident had occurred at that very intersection, at the very time I would have passed through it, involving a truck that had lost control. Beloved, I did not see that accident happen. I did not receive a vision of flames or wreckage. If you have not yet subscribed to this channel, do it now, beloved, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another message like this one. Share this video with someone in your life who needs to know that they are not alone, that heaven has not forgotten them, and that even now angels are standing watch over their house. God bless you, beloved.